Wow. You guys are funny. I always love a really good setup to talk times, like the bumper videos that really make you feel something. That one kind of makes me feel something. I don't know. I think it's really good. I think it's really cool because there's a mix of like cinema magic of like they really make the music and like whatever you're watching be a certain thing. I don't know. It's my favorite. I like music and stuff and how it makes you feel. Anyways, talking about music, do you guys want to know a fun fact about myself? Because I love talking about myself. I'm just kidding. No, I kind of do. Everybody loves talking about themselves. So, fun fact, when I was in youth group, if you didn't know, I actually went to youth group right here and sat in that same pipe and drape for 7 years, just like you. And at one point in my senior year, I was actually in the youth band for a hot second as a singer. Could you imagine me being in the youth band as a singer? It's pretty laughable. So the reason why I tell you this is because there was this one week. I've always loved singing. I sing in the car. I sing to every single song. It's my favorite. I like to think I'm a good singer. I can match pitch, but that's about it. Like that's where I get with my skills. I one time was like singing at a practice because I hung around the church all the time. I basically lived here. I still basically live here. Now I'm here full time. I mean, I don't know what I got myself into. Anyways, I was at a youth practice one time, and the band director at the time, or whoever's in charge of the band at the time, walked by me, and he was like, "Hey, you have a good voice." And I'm like, "Haha, funny." And he was like, "You should be in the youth band." I'm like, okay." And so then I was part of the youth band, and they actually put me up on stage and let me sing a couple of times. When I tell you it was terrifying, it was terrifying. Because if you actually have had no prior experience to actually singing in front of a crowd, it's probably the scariest thing you could do. Because here's the thing, I don't know how to harmonize, and when there's not anybody else singing, I don't know how to like sing the right note. And so being up on stage is scary. Needless to say, I think I did it like 2 times. One time I did it in the morning of church. That was even scarier. I don't think I'll ever really do it again. But the reason why I bring this up is because we're in this series. Last week we started this series called Even If, and we're talking a lot about change. And one of the things we often experience with change is fear. And so, like me attempting to be a singer at one point in my life, fear can stop us from making the changes that we want. And so last week we talked about some changes that can be scary, like starting a new grade or a new school, or losing a group of friends, or a disruption in our family. And so sometimes we don't even have to experience anything in real life to get our fear going. Have you guys ever simply imagined a change going wrong, and then that was just enough for you to like not want to make that change? Raise your hand if you've ever done that to yourself. Yeah, thought about like the worst case scenario, like the fear of failure. Have you ever felt the fear of failing? Like the idea of not making the team, getting rejected for a date when you ask someone out on a date, or to homecoming or prom, not getting picked for a role in a play, or not getting into that college can stop us from trying. And it's scary. And oftentimes, or other times, before we make a change, we want to know what the outcome will be. Excuse me, that was loud. Like if somehow you knew that if you'd get that part before you auditioned, you would it would be a piece of cake when you auditioned because you already knew that you would get the part. But we can't see the future. And we don't know the after of what the change will bring us, and that's also scary. It's called the fear of the unknown. Sorry. There's an uncertainty about what's going to happen in the future, which makes the present tough to handle. And it makes us feel vulnerable or insecure, or just facing the possibility of disappointment or rejection is a lot. And other times, our fear of change is connected to whether or not people are watching us. Other times, there's a fear of people connecting, thank you so much, of whether other people are being around you. So for me, there was other people that were in the room when I was singing for the first time. And that's what really made it scary. What about you guys? If you ever tell your small group or a close group of friends that you want to commit to something, whether that's changing a habit or something else, and then all of a sudden they're actually paying attention to whether or not you're doing it and you're achieving like that thing that you wanted to change? Because let's be honest, if I wanted to make a change, it's one thing with just me knowing whether or not I'm succeeding or failing. It's an entirely different thing, and as soon as other people are involved, it feels different. I mean, it's really less of a fear of the unknown and more of a fear of rejection. And rejection hurts, which can lead us to feeling judged and made fun of or left out. And making change isn't easy. I mean, we talked about that last week. Change isn't easy, but making change isn't easy either. Fear of failure, fear of the unknown, fear of rejection, I get it. And all of that fear can make us want to avoid any sort of change at all costs, and pushing us to want to quit or hide or just play it safe when it comes to our lives. But what if, even if everything never stopped changing around us, what if there was a way to not get knocked off by by fear? What if there was a way to where fear wouldn't get in the way of everything changing? So tonight we're going to continue talking about the people of Israel that we talked about last week. And so in the Old Testament, they're known as the God's chosen people. And one of the stories we know of them, God did something really cool and led them into Egypt to escape a really bad famine that was about to happen. And so he actually led them into another country, these huge group of people, so that they basically wouldn't starve to death, which should be a good thing, right? Right? Yeah, you guys are so funny. Well, if you've ever been obsessed with the movie Prince of Egypt like my siblings and I ever was, who in here has watched the movie Prince of Egypt? Oh my gosh, it's only the adults in here. Never mind. You guys need to go home and watch it. It's so good. Yeah, Zariah, I'm proud of you. Well, if you've ever watched that movie or you go home and you watch that movie, because I highly recommend it, you'll know that the Egyptians enslaved the Israelites. So when that happened, they cried out to God for help. And God sent a man named Moses. Who here has heard of Moses before? Yeah, he's a pretty big man in the Old Testament. So I'm glad that you at least have heard of him. And he sent this man named Moses to lead the people of Israel out of slavery. And so Moses was going to lead God's people into an incredible new land of their own. And a land that they called the Promised Land, because God made a promise to lead them there, and it was going to be full of beautiful things. It was overflowing with the most beautiful fruits and anything that they could ever eat and need. They wouldn't have any troubles. And again, that all sounds like a good change to be. Nothing to fear, right? Well, when they arrived to this supposed Promised Land, they got really scared. They got nervous and scared about what might lie ahead. So what they ended up doing is they sent 12 people, 12 of their spies into the land that they were about to inhabit. And the spies went in and found that the land was absolutely beautiful. And it was everything they dreamed it to be, everything that God said that it would be. But there was one small problem. There were people who looked like giants that inhabited the land that they were supposed to go into. And so suddenly, it wasn't looking so awesome. And so then when the spies came back, they report what they saw. And so we're actually going to look into scripture a little bit rather than me just telling you a funny story. And so these spies tell them this really amazing thing. So they gave Moses this account. We went into the land to which you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey. Here is its fruits. We could keep on going. But the people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. So the spies went on to tell all of Israel that there was no way that they could even live there. They were too afraid. Now, in a lot of ways, you can't really blame them, because there are people there that were very powerful, and cities that were fortified, like really hard to get into and take over, and it was inhabited. There was other people living there. And giants are scary. I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever been around really tall people, but it's kind of scary being short compared to them. And going to war against giants, even scarier. And so there's fear is pretty understandable. And I think the same that can be true for us. So when you and I decide to make changes in our life for the better, we face giants too. And often in the form of fear. And the fear of failure, the fear of rejection, and the fear of the unknown are kind of giants that we have to face. And they're very real. And there's nothing wrong for us to feel that fear. It's a very normal reaction. We have this thing called fight or flight, and it's a reaction to fear to make sure that we survive and we stay safe. And it's not easy for us to make a change or get out of an unhealthy relationship or friendship or try to break a bad habit or make a positive change in your life, a positive move that we know we should do. And often we respond like the spies did in that story. We say, I can't do it. It's too difficult. It's too scary. I don't know what's going to happen. The giant of fear is too big. And so even if we genuinely want to know what's on the other side of that change, we stay exactly where we are. And we have no idea what we could miss if we allow fears to be greater than our attempt to change for the better. And if we let our fears control us, they have the ability to cause us to miss out on some really good things in life. The goal behind fear in these moments is for us to miss out on God's best for us. And that's the last thing that God wants for us. Now, fortunately, not all of these spies, so that was just 10 spies that came back. Not all of the spies came back with the same report. So 2 of the spies, named Joshua and Caleb, can everybody say Joshua and Caleb? Oh my gosh, you guys really know how to speak. They came back with a completely different view from the other people and the other spies. And so this is what they actually said. And they said to the entire Israel assembly, the land we passed through and explored is exceedingly good. If the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into that land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and will give it to us. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we will devour them. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them. Now, maybe you noticed that at the end of that verse there, in the second to last slide, it says they will devour the people already living there. And that sounds kind of weird and violent. And so if that makes you a little uncomfortable, well, it probably should, because it's a weird thing to say. And so the Hebrew people were actually divided into tribes where having land and taking land was a way of showing and maintaining power in that time. Needless to say, sometimes it got violent, and it made sense to them to have to take this land and the people living in it. And so which doesn't mean that's what they should have done, or even it's what God actually said for them to do. And this is just what they understood what God had meant, and they wrote it down that way. And so the point is that when you're reading a document that's several thousand years, like very many thousands of years old, like BC, thousands of years into BC old, written in a different culture and different practices, there are bound to be confusing things that come up. And so it's okay to acknowledge them and to even talk to others about them. And best of all, God isn't afraid of them. If Hebrews got it wrong about what God said, we can know that the truest representation of what God is Jesus, who is God in the flesh. And so while we may not know exactly what God said in this moment or in this instance, we can know that what God's Son is like, and there's no confusion over Jesus demonstrating God's love. And so I just want to put that out there. Now off of that sidetracked and back to the promised land. So everyone said that they couldn't take the land except for these 2 people out of an entire nation of people. So why was their response so different? Why was their response so different than the other 10 people that went in there? Guys, because their fear didn't get the last word. They knew their fear was not the end of the story, and they saw God as a part of that story, and he had gotten them this far. So why wouldn't he get them even farther? Even if they were afraid, God would meet them in the other side of their fear. So even if they were afraid, God would meet them on the other side of their fear. They knew that now was a time to flex their ability to trust him. And so did that mean that they weren't scared? No way. I mean, they were about to go up against giants. They were probably terrified, more terrified than I was when I was singing up here on stage in front of people. But here's the thing about trusting God. It's not about not being scared. So when we say to trust God, we're not saying that if you're scared about a situation, then you're not putting any trust into God. Guys, it's about following him even though you're scared. Now that's some kind of bravery. You feel fear, which is a very normal thing, and you still trust in God even though you're scared. So God is bigger than anything in the unknown. So you can have courage even if any of the situations that you live in. This is our bottom line tonight. Guys, God is bigger than anything in the unknown. So you could have courage even if. Those giants may have been real. They may not have been real. And their fear was definitely real either way. But they knew they could have courage because of who God is. And so they trusted him, and they took that leap of faith, and they had their fear run the show. Well, if they had had their fear run the show, they would have given the fear the final word of the story. And they knew God would meet them on the other side of their fear no matter how they felt. And so you and I can do the same thing when it comes to the areas of our lives where we want to make changes. You can have the courage even if you're afraid. It may be scary before we make those changes, but it will be worth it afterwards because we can know that God will still be with us in that, and he is bigger than those worries and bigger than those fears. So how are some ways that we can practically put this into action? So here are a few steps to help us start on having courage even when we're afraid. So the first one is this. Identify one change you'd like to make. So we're going to identify one thing. As you listen today, was there something that came to mind? Is there something that you want to audition or try out for? Is there a relationship that's not good for you that you might need to step away from for a little bit? Is there a relationship that needs to be improved that you could take some steps to do that? Is there a habit in your life that needs to be replaced with something healthier? Is there a grade that needs to be raised? Maybe there's a part of yourself that you're holding from others because of fear. Now, you might have multiple answers. I know that when I was writing this talk, I had multiple answers to those fears. But for the sake of today, let's just focus on one thing. Let's just focus on one thing, because the second one is to identify one fear that surfaced as you thought of it. So we've identified that one fear that surfaced as we thought of it. So this is a thing that makes you pause and think, I'm not sure that I can do that. Maybe it's a fear of rejection or failure or fear of the unknown. Maybe it's a fear of actually changing, because that's just scary in itself. And maybe it's a fear of the work that you'd have to put in to make that change, because sometimes making change is really hard. And whatever it is, this is your giant. So whatever that fear is, this is the giant that you have to face. Pay attention to the giant. And then the third thing, invite God in. Guys, this is your chance to introduce your fear to God, because he's not afraid of it. This is your chance to have a Joshua and Caleb moment, like those two spies. This is your chance to remember that God is bigger than your fear. You could do something as simple as praying to God and sharing with him the change that you want to make and the fear that's keeping you stuck. Talk with him about it. Be honest with him. Let sharing your fear be the first step in choosing a different response to fear. Fear is a legitimate and normal thing, but it doesn't have to control us, and it doesn't have to cause us to miss out. Even when you and I are scared of taking that step, we can invite God into that fear, because everything may change, but some things will never change. And a few of those things is that God is with us and that he is bigger than our fear, and that we can have courage even if. Friends, will you pray with me? Lord, sometimes change can just be hard, and then sometimes when we want to make a change can be really scary. I know that there's been times in my life to where it's been super hard and I have missed out on a lot of stuff because I've let fear get in the way. Lord, I don't want that to be the story for these students because I want them to learn to know you in a way that they will know that you are stronger and bigger than their fear. Lord, I ask that you be with these students as they're navigating changes in their life, changes that they want to make or changes that are just happening. And I ask that you be with them and that you let them know that fear doesn't get the final answer. Help them with that. Help them face a giant in their life. Lord, I ask that you be with them in small groups as they talk about their giants or they talk about changes or fears that they might be having so that they can know that they're not alone, not only with God, but with each other. And that we have community in numbers for a reason so that we could tackle those giants and those fears together. It's in your name I pray. Amen.